There are horror movies that scare you in that moment. And then there are horror movies that stay with you long after the credits roll. The Babadook is firmly in the second category. I watched this movie quite a while ago, much like The Ritual, and even though time has passed, the feeling it left behind never really faded. That alone says something. Horror is a genre where most films blur together. You remember a jump scare here, a creepy scene over there, but the movie itself disappears. The Babadook doesn't disappear, it lingers. And I think the reason it lingers is simple. The movie refuses to tell you exactly what it is. On the surface, the Babadook looks like a fairly standard horror setup. A single mother, a troubled child, a strange book, a creature that may or may not be real. But very quickly you realize the movie isn't interested in playing by normal horror movie rules. It's not trying to overwhelm you with constant scares. It's not trying to explain its mythology in detail. It's definitely not interested in spelling things out for the audience. Instead, it does something far more uncomfortable. It puts you inside the mental and emotional state of its main character. What I admire about the Babadook is how deliberately ambiguous it is. Two people can watch the same movie and walk away with completely different interpretations, and both can be valid. My personal reading of this film was that I don't think the monster ever truly even existed. No one sees the creature except the mother, and the events of the film line up almost perfectly with her mental deterioration. The events of the film line up almost perfectly with her mental deterioration. She's a single parent, emotionally exhausted, grieving, isolated, and under constant pressure. Raising a child alone is difficult. Raising a child who is constantly anxious, loud, and demanding pushes her even further. The monster in that interpretation isn't a supernatural being, it's a psychological collapse made visible. The Babadook becomes a manifestation of unresolved grief, suppressed anger, and overwhelming responsibility, something growing in her mind because she has nowhere else to put these feelings. And that reading makes the movie incredibly effective because it doesn't treat mental suffering as something dramatic or cinematic. It treats it as slow, ugly, and suffocating. And here's the important part. The movie never confirms that interpretation. There's a monster in the film. It's also on the poster of the movie. It's in the title. It has rules, imagery, and presence. Plenty of people watch Babadook and walk away convinced that the creature absolutely exists within the world of the movie, and they're not wrong either. The film allows both readings to coexist, and that's where the Babadook separates itself from most modern horror movies. Most horror movies are terrified of ambiguity. They feel the need to explain everything, where the monster came from, what it wants, how it works, and how to defeat it. The Babadook does the quite opposite. It trusts the audience. It understands that fear doesn't come from knowing. Sometimes fear comes from not knowing, from uncertainty, from not being able to neatly categorize what you're seeing. Is this a supernatural story, or is it a psychological one, or is it both? The movie never answers that question. Definitely because of that, people are still talking about it years later, and that's not an accident. Whether you believe the monster exists or not, the metaphor is impossible to ignore. The Babadook represents something that simply cannot be destroyed. You don't defeat it, you don't banish it forever, you don't pretend it never existed. By the end of the film, the monster is still there, contained, managed, and acknowledged. And that's one of the most honest endings in horror. It suggests that grief, trauma, and psychological pain doesn't disappear just because you confront them once. They become something you live with, something you can manage, something you learn to control rather than erase. That's a deeply uncomfortable idea, but at the same time, it's also very human. The Babadook isn't loud and it isn't flashy. It doesn't rely on spectacle. It stands out because it respects the audience enough to leave space for interpretation. It understands that fear isn't universal, it's personal. Some viewers are terrified by the idea of a monster lurking in the dark. Others are disturbed by the idea that the monster might only exist in their mind. The film works for both people, and that's why it's remembered. I wouldn't call Babadook underrated. It received plenty of critical praise when it released. But I would say that more people should watch it, especially people who think horror is just about jump scares and gore. This is the kind of movie that stays with you, the kind that sparks discussions, the kind that doesn't give you clean answers. And in a genre that often over-explains itself, that restraint is refreshing. So, let me know what you think. Do you believe the monster was real? Or do you think it only existed in the mother's mind? Or do you think the film intentionally sits somewhere in between? And as always, it's time for a goodbye.